Sometimes the biggest secrets are carried in the quietest ways. A police officer thought it was just another rough day, and a homeless black teenager was just another face on the street. But what seemed like a joke to the officer soon turned into something he never expected. One small backpack was about to change everything he thought he knew about life, choices, and the people he swore to protect. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you are watching from today and what time you are currently watching this video. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more. The streets of Baltimore had their usual sound that evening, horns blaring, footsteps rushing, and the buzz of voices that mixed frustration with survival. Officer Daniel Harris leaned against his patrol car, sipping lukewarm coffee, his eyes scanning the corner near an old bus stop. The sun was going down, throwing a rusty glow across cracked sidewalks. A small group of teens were hanging near the corner store, their laughter echoing as they teased one another. Most of them had decent clothes, baggy jeans, sneakers, hoodies. But one boy stood apart. He was skinny, too skinny for his age, maybe 15 or 16. His jacket was worn thin, the color washed out by rain and time. His shoes had holes near the toes. His backpack, black, tore at the seams, with one strap nearly coming off, hung on his back as though it was the only thing keeping him upright. Daniel noticed him because the boy didn't laugh with the others. He didn't lean on the walls like he belonged. Instead, he sat on the cold curb, staring at the ground. Every few minutes he would clutch the backpack close to his chest, then release it again like a nervous habit. Daniel chuckled under his breath. "Another runaway," he muttered, shaking his head. "Probably holding trash in that bag." He took another sip of his coffee, eyes never leaving the boy. The radio on his shoulder crackled, calling out another officer to a different part of the city. But Daniel ignored it for a second, curious now. He pushed himself off the car and walked toward the boy. "Hey!" Daniel called, his boots heavy on the pavement. "What are you doing out here?" The boy looked up, startled, his dark eyes wide. He didn't answer at first. His hands gripped the backpack tighter. Daniel smirked. "What's in there?" "All your worldly treasures." He let out a laugh, the kind of laugh that came more from boredom than humor. "Or maybe you've got your whole life packed in that thing, huh?" The boy's lips parted, but no sound came. He lowered his gaze again, shoulders tense. "You deaf kid?" Daniel pressed, standing over him now. "I asked what's in the bag." The boy shook his head slowly. "Nothing," he whispered. "Nothing, huh?" Daniel crouched down, still smiling. "You're hugging it like it's worth $1 million." The laughter in his voice carried, but something about the boy's silence made it fade quicker than Daniel expected. He studied him for a moment longer. The boy's face was pale, not from fear exactly, but from exhaustion, like he hadn't slept in days. Like the weight on his back was heavier than it looked. Behind them, a car horn blared, and the group of other teens scattered, running down the block. The sound pulled Daniel's attention for a second, and when he looked back, the boy was standing. "Sit back down," Daniel ordered. The boy froze. His grip on the backpack tightened even more. Daniel reached out, his hand brushing the strap. "Relax, I'm not going to steal your little toy bag." He chuckled again, though softer this time. But as soon as he tugged at the strap, the boy stepped back. "Don't touch it," he said quickly, his voice sharp now. Daniel raised an eyebrow. That tone wasn't begging, it was warning. The officer straightened up, his curiosity deepening. "What's so special about it?" "Huh? Were you hiding?" The boy didn't answer. Instead, he turned and started walking away, fast. Daniel followed. "Hold it right there, kid. I'm talking to you." The boy didn't stop. His skinny frame moved quickly through the crowd of people heading home from work. Daniel's boots clapped against the pavement as he kept after him. "Stop!" Daniel barked. Finally, the boy turned into an alley. Daniel quickened his pace, his radio bouncing against his chest. He was annoyed now, but also strangely drawn in. He had dealt with hundreds of kids on the street, but none of them clutched a backpack like this one. The alley smelled of trash and dampness. A broken streetlight flickered overhead. The boy was halfway down, his steps quick, his backpack bouncing against him. Daniel moved in, ready to grab him by the arm. But then the boy stopped suddenly and spun around. His chest heaved, his eyes glistened. And for the first time, Daniel saw something in them. Not just fear, not just exhaustion, but a kind of desperation that sent a small chill down his spine. "I said, don't touch my bag," the boy repeated. Daniel let out a low whistle. "Kid, you're acting like you've got gold bricks in there. What is it? Drugs? Stolen phones? Guns?" The boy shook his head fiercely. "No, none of that." "Then what?" Daniel pushed. The boy pressed his lips together, silent. His hand stayed firmly on the backpack straps, as if letting go was an option. Daniel narrowed his eyes. For the first time since he'd spotted the teen, the laughter died from his face completely. Because whatever was in that bag, it wasn't ordinary. And Daniel could feel it. The alley was silent except for the faint dripping of water from a broken pipe and the sound of Daniel's boots shifting on the uneven ground. The boy stood like a cornered animal, gripping the straps of his backpack with white knuckles. His chest rose and fell, quick and shallow. Daniel adjusted his stance, lowering his voice. Look, kid, I'm not here to hurt you, but running from a cop isn't a good idea. You got to know that. The boy didn't respond. His eyes darted between the exit of the alley and Daniel's tall figure blocking the way. Why don't you tell me your name first? Daniel asked, trying to sound calmer. I'm Officer Harris. People call me Dan. What about you? The boy swallowed hard but said nothing. He simply hugged the bag tighter, his arms trembling from the pressure. Daniel sighed. All right, let me guess. You've been sleeping on the streets. That bag's the only thing you got left, huh? The boy's lips parted slightly, as though he wanted to argue, but he said nothing. Daniel tilted his head. That's it, isn't it? You got clothes in there, maybe a blanket, maybe some food you swiped from a store. That's why you're so protective. No, the boy said suddenly, his voice shaky but clear. Daniel raised a brow. No? Then what is it? The boy hesitated, his breathing ragged. You wouldn't understand. Daniel took a step closer. The boy immediately shifted back, pressing himself against the cold brick wall. His hand slipped inside the side pocket of the backpack, as if making sure something was still there. The officer frowned. Kid, if you got a weapon in there, you better tell me now. No weapon, the boy said quickly, shaking his head. I swear. Then why are you acting like it's the crown jewels? Daniel asked. The boy glanced down at the ground, then back up. Because it's all I have left. If I lose it, I lose everything. There was something about the way he said those words, flat, simple, with no exaggeration, that made Daniel pause. He had heard kids lie before, spin wild stories to get out of trouble. But this boy's voice carried something different, something raw. Before Daniel could ask more, a sound broke the moment. From behind them, a trash can clattered as a cat jumped out, hissing before darting off into the dark. Both Daniel and the boy flinched. The boy took the chance. He bolted. Hey! Daniel shouted, lunging forward. His hand snagged the boy's arm just as he tried to run past. The kid struggled, thrashing with surprising strength for his size. The backpack swung wildly, almost slipping off. Let me go, the boy yelled, kicking at Daniel's shin. Daniel winced but held tight. Calm down. You're not making this any easier. The boy twisted, desperate, his eyes wild with panic. For a moment, the strap on his backpack tore a little more, threatening to snap. He froze instantly, both hands clutching again like his life depended on it. Daniel noticed that reaction, sharp and intense. What is it about that bag, huh? What are you hiding from me? Nothing illegal, the boy cried, his voice cracking. I swear it's nothing bad. Daniel tightened his grip, but not harshly. He studied the boy's face, pale under the flickering light. His eyes were watery, his lips trembling. This wasn't just fear of police. It was fear of losing whatever was inside that backpack. The officer let out a slow breath. All right, listen. I'm not here to throw you in jail for no reason, but you can't keep running. If you got nothing to hide, then let me see what's in the bag. That's all. The boy shook his head violently. No, you don't get it. Then make me get it, Daniel urged. The boy's eyes filled with tears he refused to let fall. I can't. Not here. Not like this. Daniel's patience wavered, but something in the boy's tone stopped him from snapping. He released his grip just enough for the boy to breathe, though he stayed close, blocking the alley's exit. You know, kid, you've got two choices right now, Daniel said quietly. You can trust me, or you can keep fighting me and end up in more trouble than you want. So which is it going to be? The boy hesitated. His eyes flicked down the alley, then back to Daniel. His shoulders slumped slightly, but his grip on the backpack never loosened. I can't open it here, the boy whispered. Too many people. Too dangerous. Daniel frowned. Too dangerous? What are you talking about? Dangerous for you or for me? The boy shook his head. Both. A chill ran through Daniel, but he forced his voice steady. You're not making any sense. I'll explain, the boy said quickly. Just, not now. Please, let me go and I'll show you. Somewhere else. Daniel studied him hard. His cop instinct screamed not to let the boy walk away. But something deeper, a mixture of curiosity and something he couldn't quite name, made him hesitate. You're asking me to trust you, Daniel said slowly. Yes, the boy whispered. And you're not giving me a single reason why I should. The boy looked at him, really looked at him for the first time, his eyes pleading. Because if you don't, you'll regret it. The words landed heavy, more serious than a threat, more honest than a lie. The officer's jaw tightened. His radio buzzed with a call from dispatch. But he ignored it, his attention locked on the trembling kid in front of him. For the first time that night, Daniel felt the ground shift beneath the ordinary rhythm of his job. This wasn't just another homeless teen, and that backpack wasn't just another bag. Something bigger was sitting right in front of him, and he had no idea what he was about to step into. The radio on Daniel's chest kept buzzing, voices asking for updates, but he ignored it. His eyes stayed on the boy, who still held that torn backpack, like it was glued to him. The air in the alley was heavy. Trash littered the ground, and the faint smell of fried food drifted from a diner nearby. But Daniel didn't notice any of that. His focus was on the kid's trembling hands. "All right," Daniel said finally, his tone steady. "If you want to trust you, then you got to trust me back. Where are you asking me to go?" The boy licked his dry lips nervously. "Not far, just a place." "Safe." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Safe from what?" The boy hesitated. His eyes darted toward the street, then back at Daniel. "Safe from people watching. Safe from the ones who'd take it from me." Daniel studied him carefully. The words weren't loud or dramatic. They were whispered, quiet, almost scared. This wasn't a kid bluffing. Something was making him guard that bag with his life. "Fine," Daniel said at last. "Show me, but if you try to run again, I won't go easy on you." The boy gave a small nod, clutching his backpack closer. He stepped past Daniel slowly, his thin frame brushing against the officer's arm. Daniel followed right behind, his senses sharp. They moved out of the alley and back onto the main street. The sidewalks were crowded with people leaving work, cars honking, street vendors calling out. The boy's pace quickened, weaving between the crowd, but Daniel kept close. The officer noticed how the boy kept glancing over his shoulder, not just at him, but at the people around them. His eyes scanned faces, searching for something or someone. It was the kind of look Daniel had seen before on kids who'd been hunted. "Who are you afraid of?" Daniel asked as they walked. The boy didn't answer. He just tightened his grip on the straps and kept moving. They crossed a busy intersection, the headlights of cars flashing against them. Daniel stayed alert, one hand resting on his holster. Not because he thought the kid was dangerous, but because something about the way he acted made Daniel uneasy. Finally, the boy turned down another street, quieter this time, lined with boarded-up shops and broken windows. He led Daniel toward an old building with peeling paint and a half-broken door. "This the place?" Daniel asked, frowning. The boy nodded. "No one comes here. It's empty." Daniel pushed the door open cautiously. The hinges squealed, echoing into the dark inside. Dust hung in the air, and the faint smell of mold hit him. The boy slipped inside quickly. Daniel followed, pulling out his flashlight. The beam cut through the shadows, revealing cracked tiles, graffiti on the walls, and broken furniture scattered around. The boy walked deeper into the building, his steps familiar, as if he had been there before. Daniel's light followed him until they reached a small room in the back. "Here," the boy whispered. Daniel lowered his flashlight. The boy set the backpack on a broken chair in the corner. For the first time, he let go of it. His hands hovered just above the bag, shaky, as though he wasn't sure if he was making the right choice. Daniel crossed his arms. "All right, kid, now's the time. What's in the bag?" The boy swallowed hard. His fingers lingered on the zipper. He looked at Daniel, eyes wide. "Promise me something first." Daniel narrowed his eyes. "Promise you what?" "That you won't take it from me," the boy said. "No matter what, it has to stay with me." Daniel's jaw tightened. "That depends on what's in there. If it's dangerous, I can't make that promise." The boy shook his head quickly. "It's not dangerous. Not the way you think. But it's mine. It's all I have." Daniel studied him for a long moment. "All right, I won't take it from you unless I have to. That's the best I can do." The boy hesitated, then slowly unzipped the backpack. The sound echoed in the silent room. Daniel leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed on the bag. He expected clothes, maybe food, maybe something stolen. But the boy's hands were careful, almost reverent, as he reached inside. Before he could pull anything out, a noise from outside made them both freeze. Footsteps. Heavy ones. More than one pair. Daniel quickly motioned for the boy to stop. He pulled his flashlight off and drew his gun, pressing himself against the wall near the door. The boy clutched the backpack shut again, his eyes wide with panic. The footsteps grew louder, crunching against broken glass in the hallway. Voices followed, low, rough, angry. "Check the rooms," one voice said. "The kid has to be in here somewhere." Daniel's grip on his weapon tightened. He glanced at the boy, who looked terrified, his body trembling. "You know them?" Daniel whispered. The boy nodded quickly. "Yes, they've been following me for days." Daniel cursed under his breath. "And you didn't think to mention that?" "I told you it wasn't safe out there," the boy whispered back. The footsteps drew closer. Shadows stretched across the wall as flashlights swept through the hallway. Daniel took a deep breath, his heart pounding. This wasn't just a simple runaway kid. Someone was after him. And judging by the way those voices sounded, they weren't planning to just scare him. The boy hugged his backpack to his chest again, his eyes locked on Daniel's. "Don't let them take it," he whispered. "Please." The sound of boots thudded just outside the door now. A voice growled, "Check this one." Daniel steadied himself, weapon raised, his body tense. The door creaked as a hand pushed it open. And in that instant, the night shifted into something far more dangerous than Daniel had expected when he first laughed at a homeless kid on the curb. The broken door creaked open slowly, the wood scraping against the floor. A thin beam of light cut through the dusty room. Daniel pressed himself against the wall, gun raised, eyes sharp. The boy crouched in the corner, clutching his backpack, so tight his knuckles were white. Two men stepped into the room. They weren't cops. Their clothes were rough, hoodies pulled up, faces partly shadowed. One was tall and broad, the other shorter but wiry, his eyes darting quickly across the room. Both carried heavy flashlights that doubled as blunt weapons. "See? Told you he'd come here," the tall one said, his voice rough. The shorter one scanned the room, and his eyes locked onto the boy. "There he is." The boy shrank back instinctively, pressing himself against the wall. Daniel stepped forward, his weapon pointed steady. "Stop right there." His voice cut through the tension like a knife. The two men froze, their flashlights sweeping toward him. "Who the hell are you?" the tall one demanded. "Police," Daniel said firmly. "And you're trespassing. Step back, hand where I can see them." The shorter man sneered. "This doesn't concern you, officer. Walk away and no one gets hurt." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I'm not walking away. Now, put your hands up." The tall man laughed coldly. "You think a badge scares us? That kid has something that belongs to us. Hand him over." Daniel didn't move. "He's under my protection. Whatever business you have with him ends here." The boy's breathing grew fast and shallow, his eyes wide. He looked from the men to Daniel, fear written all over his face. The shorter man stepped forward. Daniel raised his weapon higher. "Don't test me." For a moment, the air was frozen. Then the tall man spoke again, his tone darker. "You don't get it, officer. That bag isn't his. It's ours, and we're not leaving without it." Daniel's eyes flicked briefly toward the boy, who shook his head fiercely. "They're lying," he whispered urgently. Daniel shifted his stance, keeping his weapon locked on the intruders. "Back away. Now!" The shorter man cursed under his breath. "Fine." He raised his hand slightly, but his eyes never left the backpack. The tall man smirked. "You can't protect him forever, cop. You don't even know what you're dealing with." Daniel's voice was calm but firm. "Try me." The tall man's smile faded. His hand twitched as though reaching for something under his hoodie. "Don't," Daniel warned sharply. The standoff stretched tight, the kind of silence that could snap into chaos at any second. Then, suddenly, the shorter man lunged. Daniel reacted instantly, shoving him back with his shoulder while swinging his gun toward the tall one. The tall man grabbed a broken chair from the corner and hurled it across the room. It crashed against the wall, splinters flying. "Run," Daniel barked at the boy. The boy bolted toward the hallway, clutching the backpack to his chest. The shorter man tried to grab him, but Daniel intercepted, slamming him against the wall. The tall man rushed forward, swinging his flashlight like a club. Daniel ducked, the heavy metal scraping his shoulder. He pushed the tall man back with his elbow, but the fight was close and tight. The boy's footsteps echoed in the hallway, fast and frantic. "Don't let him get away," the tall man shouted. The shorter one twisted free of Daniel's grip and sprinted after the boy. Daniel cursed, shoving the tall man off him and charging after them. The building's hallway echoed with shouts, footsteps, and the crash of debris being knocked over. The boy darted around a corner, panting hard, clutching the bag like his life depended on it. The shorter man lunged for him, fingers grazing the strap, but the boy twisted away and stumbled through a half-open door. Daniel was only steps behind. He grabbed the shorter man by the back of his hoodie and yanked him down hard. The man hit the floor with a grunt. The tall man came charging behind, but Daniel spun, his gun leveled right at his chest. "Don't move." For a moment, the tall man froze, rage burning in his eyes. His fists clenched, but he didn't step forward. The boy appeared in the doorway again, chest heaving, backpack still strapped to him. He looked at Daniel, panic written all over his face. "Go," Daniel barked. "Out the back." The boy hesitated, torn between running and staying. "Now," Daniel shouted. The boy turned and disappeared into the dark. The tall man cursed loudly, his face twisting with frustration. "You're making a mistake, cop." Daniel's eyes didn't waver. "The only mistake is thinking you could corner a kid and walk away with it." Sirens wailed faintly in the distance now, growing louder. Someone must have called in the disturbance. The shorter man groaned on the floor, trying to push himself up. Daniel pressed his boot against his chest, keeping him down. The tall man glared, breathing heavy. "This isn't over." "Maybe not," Daniel said, "but it's over for tonight." The tall man took a step back, weighing his options. Then, with a snarl, he turned and bolted through another hallway exit. Daniel kept his gun on him until he vanished into the night. The sirens grew louder, red and blue lights flashing faintly through the dirty windows. The shorter man beneath Daniel's boot cursed and spat, but he wasn't going anywhere. Daniel held him until backup arrived. Within minutes, other officers swarmed the building, cuffing the shorter man and searching for the tall one, who had slipped away. Daniel finally lowered his weapon, his chest rising and falling with the weight of adrenaline. But his mind wasn't on the man in cuffs. It was on the boy. Where had he run to? Was he safe? And more importantly, what was in that backpack that could make grown men risk so much to get it back? Daniel stepped outside the building, scanning the dark streets. The city stretched out before him, restless and alive, but the boy was nowhere in sight. The sirens faded into background as Daniel stood there, realizing one thing. He wasn't laughing anymore. Whatever that boy carried, it wasn't just a survival. It was bigger. And Daniel had just stepped right into the middle of it. The night air outside the abandoned building was sharp and cold. Daniel stepped onto the cracked pavement, his eyes sweeping every corner. Streetlights buzzed weakly, throwing pale light across empty sidewalks. The other officers were busy cuffing the shorter suspect and taking statements, but Daniel wasn't focused on them. His mind was on the boy. "Where the hell did you go, kid?" he muttered under his breath. He jogged down the block, scanning alleys and side streets. His boots crunched on broken glass. His pulse was still racing from the fight inside, but now it was mixed with worry. The boy had vanished with that backpack, and the men chasing him had made it clear it wasn't over. Daniel rounded a corner and stopped, listening. Somewhere in the distance, he heard footsteps, light, hurried. He followed the sound. The street was quieter here, lined with rundown row houses and shuttered storefronts. A lone streetlight flickered above, casting shadows that shifted with every passing second. Daniel slowed his pace, listening again. Then he saw him. The boy was crouched near a dumpster, his chest heaving, clutching the backpack tight. His face was pale with fear, his hair damp with sweat. "Kid," Daniel called softly. The boy spun around, eyes wide, ready to run again. "Easy," Daniel said, holding up a hand. "It's me, Officer Harris. You're safe." The boy's breathing stayed fast. His grip on the backpack never loosened. "You left me back there," he said, his voice shaky. Daniel stepped closer. "I told you to run. Those men weren't after me. They were after you." The boy's lips trembled, but he didn't argue. He just hugged the bag tighter, as though Daniel might try to rip it from him. Daniel sighed. "Look, kid, you've got two choices. You keep running, and those men are going to find you sooner or later. Or you stick with me, and I make sure you're protected. Which one sounds better?" The boy's eyes darted away, then back to him. His voice dropped low. "You don't know what's in here. If you did, you might not want to protect me." Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Then explain it to me. I'm not here to hurt you, but I need to understand what's going on." The boy looked at him for a long moment, then shook his head. "Not here. Not outside. They could be watching." Daniel clenched his jaw. He hated being left in the dark, but something in the boy's eyes told him this wasn't a simple street story. "All right," Daniel said. "Then let's go somewhere safe. My car's around the corner. I'll take you to the station. No one can touch you there." The boy stiffened immediately. "No, not the station." "Why not?" Daniel asked. "They'll find me there," the boy whispered. "They have people everywhere. Even cops." Daniel frowned. "What makes you think that?" The boy shook his head again. "I just know." Daniel studied him. He wasn't lying. His fear was real, deep, the kind that came from experience, not imagination. "Fine," Daniel said. "Then you pick. Where can we go where it's safe?" The boy hesitated, biting his lip. Then he pointed down the block. "There's a church, a couple streets over. They leave the doors open sometimes. We can hide there." Daniel nodded slowly. "All right, let's move." They walked quickly, sticking to the shadows. Daniel stayed alert, scanning every corner, every parked car. His hand brushed against his holster more than once. The boy stayed close but silent, his grip never loosening on the backpack. As they turned onto another street, Daniel caught movement in the distance, two figures under a streetlight. He squinted. The tall man from earlier, with another partner now. "Damn," Daniel muttered. The boy froze. "It's them." Daniel grabbed his shoulder gently. "Keep walking. Don't run. We'll lose them." The two figures spotted them and started moving faster. "Change of plan," Daniel said quickly. "Run." The boy sprinted down the block, Daniel right beside him. Behind them, shouts rang out, followed by pounding footsteps. The boy darted across the street, nearly collided with a car that screeched to a halt. Horns blared, but they kept moving. Daniel pushed him toward the sidewalk. "There!" the boy shouted, pointing to a brick church at the corner. Its old wooden doors stood tall, faint light glowing from the stained glass windows. They raced up the steps, Daniel glancing back just as the two men closed in. Daniel shoved the doors open. The boy darted inside, clutching his bag. Daniel followed, slamming the doors shut behind him and locking the heavy latch. The inside of the church was dim, lit only by a few candles near the altar. The silence was thick, broken only by their heavy breathing. The boy collapsed onto a pew, still hugging the backpack. His whole body shook with exhaustion. Daniel crouched in front of him. "All right, kid, enough running. You need to tell me what's in that bag. Now." The boy stared at him, his eyes glistening. His lips trembled before he spoke. "It's proof," he whispered. Daniel frowned. "Proof of what?" The boy opened the backpack slightly, just enough for Daniel to catch a glimpse. Papers, folders, a small black notebook. The boy's voice cracked. Proof of what they did. Proof of everything. Before Daniel could ask what that meant, a loud bang echoed outside. The church doors rattled violently. The men had found them. Daniel stood, weapon drawn, heart pounding. The boy hugged the backpack tighter, his voice shaking. "They won't stop until they get it back." The doors boomed again, harder this time. Dust rained from the ceiling beams. Daniel planted his feet, gun aimed at the entrance. His voice was steady, even as his pulse raced. "They're going to wish they never followed you here." The boy looked at him, eyes wide with fear, but also a flicker of hope. For the first time, he wasn't running alone. The doors shook again. Any second, they'd burst open. And Daniel knew this was only the beginning. The heavy church doors shook under the force of pounding fists. Each slam echoed through the quiet building, making the wooden pews tremble. Daniel stood firm, his gun raised, his jaw tight. The boy sat frozen on the bench, clutching the backpack like a lifeline. "Stay low," Daniel whispered. The boy slid off the pew and crouched on the floor, his arms wrapped tight around the bag. His eyes never left the doors. Another boom hit, louder this time. The latch rattled, with splintering. Outside, muffled voices cursed and shouted. "They're not leaving," Daniel muttered. The boy's breathing was fast, uneven. "They'll break it down. They always do." Daniel glanced at him, his face serious. "Not tonight." He moved quickly down the aisle, scanning the shadows. The church was old but solid, high ceilings, stained glass windows, rows of pews. A few candles flickered near the altar, throwing soft light across the walls. But there were also exits, side doors near the sacristy, and maybe a back entrance. "Come on," Daniel said. "We can't wait for them to come crashing in." The boy scrambled up, still hugging the backpack. His legs trembled, but he followed closely as Daniel moved toward a side hallway. The doors boomed again, with cracking under the force. Voices grew louder. "They're inside any second," Daniel hissed. They hurried down the hall, footsteps echoing against stone walls. Daniel's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, showing broken tiles and old religious paintings faded with age. "Do you know this place?" Daniel asked. The boy nodded quickly. "I used to sleep here sometimes. There's a back door that leads to the alley." "Good," Daniel said. "Show me." They reached the back, a narrow corridor ending in a wooden door. The boy pushed against it, but it barely moved. "It's stuck," he gasped, shoving harder. Daniel holstered his gun and threw his shoulder into it. The wood groaned but didn't give. Behind them, the main doors finally burst open. A crash echoed through the church as the latch snapped and was splintered. Shouts filled the air. "They're in," the boy cried. "Move." Daniel growled. He braced himself and slammed into the door again with all his weight. The frame cracked, and finally the door swung open. Cold night air rushed in. "Go," Daniel ordered. The boy darted out into the alley, clutching the backpack. Daniel followed, gun in hand. The alley was narrow, lined with dumpsters and broken glass. The streetlights barely reached it, leaving long shadows. Behind them, the men's footsteps echoed through the church. Shouts carried through the air. "This way." Daniel grabbed the boy's arm and pulled him toward the far end of the alley. They ran, their footsteps splashing through puddles. A figure appeared suddenly at the other end, another man, blocking their escape. "Back!" Daniel barked, spinning the boy around. They dashed toward the opposite end, but voices shouted closer now. The men had split up, trying to corner them. The boy's chest heaved, his grip on the bag never loosening. "We're trapped." "No," Daniel said through clenched teeth. "Not yet." He spotted a fire escape ladder hanging halfway down a brick wall. "Up there. Climb." The boy's eyes widened. "I can't. You can," Daniel snapped. "Now." The boy scrambled to the ladder, tossing the backpack up first, then hauling himself onto the rungs. Daniel stood below, gun raised, covering him. Two men rounded the corner, flashlights cutting through the dark. "Freeze!" Daniel shouted. The men didn't. One pulled a knife, the other a pipe. They charged. Daniel fired once into the air. The blast echoed like thunder, freezing them for a second. "I said stop." The boy climbed higher, the metal ladder rattling under his weight. Daniel backed toward it slowly, keeping his gun aimed at the men. "Keep climbing, kid," he called. The men hesitated. Then one snarled, "That bag doesn't belong to him. Hand it over." "Come and take it." Daniel shot back. The boy reached the fire escape platform above. He clutched the backpack tight and looked down at Daniel. "Hurry." Daniel began climbing, one hand on the rung, the other gripping his weapon. Below, the men cursed, one of them throwing a bottle that shattered against the wall. By the time Daniel pulled himself onto the platform, the boy was already moving along the metal stairs. They climbed higher, boots clanging against steel. At the rooftop, the city stretched out around them, blocks of dark buildings, the faint glow of streetlights, the hum of traffic in the distance. Daniel scanned quickly. No easy escape up here. Just rooftops and alleys below. The boy was shaking, hugging the backpack as though it were part of him. "They won't stop," he said. Daniel caught his breath, eyes sharp. "Then neither will I." For a moment, the only sound was the boy's ragged breathing and the faint city noise below. Then, from the fire escape, more footsteps rattled. The men were climbing after them. Daniel cursed. He grabbed the boy's arm. "We can't stay here. Move across the rooftops." The boy hesitated. "I'll fall." "Not if you listen to me." Daniel pulled him forward. They ran across the flat rooftop, their footsteps echoing. The boy clutched his bag with one arm, balancing with the other. Behind them, the men clambered onto the roof, their flashlights sweeping across. Shouts carried in the night. Daniel and the boy reached the far edge. The next rooftop was across a narrow gap, maybe 6 feet. Daniel judged the distance quickly. "Jump," he told the boy. The boy's eyes widened in panic. "I can't." "Yes, you can," Daniel said firmly. "Hold that bag tight and jump." The boy's legs trembled, but he looked at Daniel's steady gaze. With a deep breath, he ran and leapt. His feet barely caught the edge of the next roof. He scrambled, clutching the bag, until he pulled himself up. "Your turn," he shouted breathlessly. Daniel sprinted and jumped, landing solidly beside him. Behind them, the men cursed, the gap slowing their chase. Daniel grabbed the boy's shoulder. "We've got to keep moving. But first, you're going to tell me what's inside that bag. No more delays." The boy's chest rose and fell quickly. His voice shook. "It's everything. Names, dates, money trails. The things they don't want anyone to see." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "You're saying those men are part of something bigger?" The boy nodded fiercely. "Bigger than you think. And if they get this back, no one will ever know." The rooftop echoed with the sound of more footsteps behind them. Daniel raised his gun again, his voice firm. "Then I guess we'd better make sure they never get it." The boy hugged the backpack tight. For the first time, his fear mixed with something else, resolve. The chase across the rooftops had only just begun. The night air was sharp, carrying the smell of smoke and wet asphalt. Daniel and the boy crouched low on the rooftop, the city lights flickering around them like distant stars. Behind them, shouts echoed, closer than before. Flashlight beams swung wildly, cutting across the darkness as the men gained ground. Daniel's jaw tightened. He pulled the boy close. "We can't outrun them forever like this. Stay close, and don't stop until I say." The boy hugged the backpack against his chest, his breathing heavy. "They won't stop chasing. Not until they have it back." "Then we make sure they don't," Daniel said flatly. They darted across the rooftop, boots thudding against the gravel. The boy stumbled once, but Daniel grabbed his arm before he could fall. Behind them, the clatter of metal echoed. The men were crossing the same rooftops, relentless. The next roof was higher. Daniel spotted an old drain pipe along the side. "Climb," he ordered. The boy looked at it with wide eyes. "It'll break." "Not if you move fast," Daniel barked. "Go." The boy slung the backpack over his shoulder and scrambled up the pipe, his sneakers slipping against the wall. Metal creaked under his weight, but he reached the top, panting. Daniel climbed right after, pulling himself up with quick, practiced movements. The moment his boots hit the rooftop, a gunshot cracked the night. A bullet sparked against the pipe they just climbed. "Down!" Daniel shouted, shoving the boy flat against the roof. He drew his own gun and fired 2 quick shots back. The pursuers scattered, but they weren't retreating. The boy's hands shook as he clutched the backpack. "They'll kill us. I told you they won't stop." Daniel's eyes scanned the horizon. His voice was steady. "Not while I'm breathing." They ran again, leaping across another gap. The boy barely made it, his foot slipping before Daniel yanked him up, his heart hammered, sweat running down his forehead. But the backpack never left his grasp. At the far end of the rooftop, Daniel spotted a rusty door leading down into the building. He shoved it open, the hinges groaning loudly, and pushed the boy inside. They descended into a dark stairwell that smelled of mildew and dust. "Stay close," Daniel whispered. Their footsteps echoed as they rushed down floor after floor. Somewhere above, the sound of boots followed. The men were right behind them. They burst into a hallway lined with broken doors and peeling wallpaper. The building seemed abandoned, its windows shattered, its walls tagged with graffiti. Trash littered the floors. "Where are we?" the boy asked. "Old tenement," Daniel replied. Perfect for losing them. They sprinted to the corridor, ducking into rooms, moving like shadows. Twice, Daniel raised his gun when footsteps neared, but each time he pulled the boy deeper into the building instead of firing. The boy's voice trembled. "Why are you helping me? You could have just walked away." Daniel didn't answer at first. He checked the hallway, then nodded for the boy to move again. "Because I've seen too many people ignored. Too many people left behind. Not this time." The boy looked at him for a second, eyes searching, then clutched the bag tighter and kept moving. Suddenly, a flashlight beam cut through the hall. One of the men spotted them. "There, don't let them get out." Daniel cursed. "Run." They bolted down the hall, shoving open a side door that led into a huge, dark storage room. Broken furniture and crates filled the space, casting long shadows. "Hide," Daniel ordered. The boy ducked behind a stack of old crates, clutching his bag to his chest. Daniel crouched behind a broken shelf, gun steady. The door burst open. Heavy footsteps filled the room. Flashlights swept across the walls, beams of light cutting through the dust. Daniel held his breath. He counted at least 3 men inside. Their voices were low, angry. "They came in here." "Spread out. Find the kid." One man's beam swept dangerously close to the crates where the boy hid. Daniel's finger tightened on the trigger. The boy's chest rose and fell rapidly, his arms tightening around the backpack. His lips moved as though whispering to himself, steadying his nerves. A shadow moved past him, a flashlight beam almost landing on his face. At the last second, Daniel tossed a piece of metal across the room. It clattered loudly against the floor. The men turned instantly, lights swinging. "Over there." They rushed toward the sound. Daniel grabbed the boy's arm. "Now!" They slipped out through a back door, sprinting into another hallway. Their footsteps pounded the floor, every nerve stretched tight. At the far end, Daniel spotted a fire exit. He shoved the bar and burst outside into the night. They emerged into a deserted street, lit only by a flickering streetlight. The boy gasped for breath. "They're everywhere. We can't keep running." Daniel turned to him, gripping his shoulders firmly. "Listen to me. If you want to survive this, I need to know exactly what's in that bag. No more guessing." The boy hesitated, then slowly unzipped the backpack. His hands shook as he pulled out a thick stack of papers, some bound, some loose, faded folders, envelopes stuffed with documents. Then came a flash drive, taped to one of the folders. "This," the boy whispered, "it's proof of who they really are. Not just those men, people way higher. Police, businessmen, politicians. They've been using the shelters, the charities, even the church. Stealing money, covering it up." Daniel's eyes darkened. He took one of the folders, flipping through quickly. Names, numbers, wire transfers. Evidence. "And you?" Daniel asked quietly. The boy swallowed hard. "My mom used to work for one of them. She kept records, everything she saw. She died before she could hand it over. I found it hidden in our old place. They've been after me ever since." Daniel closed the folder slowly. His voice was low, steady. "Now I understand." A sharp sound cut the air, a car door slamming. Headlights flashed down the street. A black SUV turned the corner, speeding toward them. "They found us," the boy cried. "Move." Daniel grabbed him, pulling him into the shadows of an alley. Tires screeched as the SUV stopped. Men spilled out, flashlights sweeping. Daniel raised his gun, backing the boy deeper into the alley. "Stay behind me." The boy clutched the backpack tightly, his face pale but determined. The men advanced, their footsteps echoing. Voices rang out. "You can't hide. Kid, hand it over, and maybe we let you live." Daniel's eyes stayed sharp, his body steady. "That's not happening." The alley filled with tension, the night air heavy. The boy pressed his back to the wall, his heart pounding. Daniel's finger rested firmly on the trigger. Somewhere deep inside, the boy knew this wasn't just about running anymore. This was about fighting back, and the men were closing in. The alley was narrow, boxed in by tall brick walls stained with years of grime. Trash cans lined the edges, and broken glass glimmered faintly under the flickering streetlight at the far end. Daniel stood in front, his gun raised steady, shielding the boy. The men spread out slowly, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The boy's chest tightened. He gripped the backpack so hard his fingers hurt. He whispered, "There's too many of them." Daniel's voice was calm but firm. "Numbers don't matter if they're sloppy." One of the men, tall and broad-shouldered, stepped forward. He wore a black jacket and held his weapon loosely, as though certain of victory. His voice carried an edge of arrogance. "You're wasting your time, officer. Hand over the bag, and maybe we'll let the kid walk." Daniel's reply was cold. You'll have to take it from me. The man smirked, raising his hand as a signal. Two others began to flank the alley, trying to box him in. Daniel's sharp eyes caught the movement immediately. He fired once. A shot rang out, shattering the silence. Sparks flew as a bullet clipped the edge of a dumpster. The men dove for cover. The alley exploded with chaos. Shouts echoed. Bullets cracked against the walls, dust and brick chips filling the air. Daniel shoved the boy behind a stack of trash cans. Stay low. Don't move. The boy crouched down, hugging the backpack to his chest, his heartbeat pounding like a drum in his ears. He could hear every sound, the ricochet of bullets, the heavy boots pounding against the pavement, the sharp curses of men trying to outmaneuver Daniel. Daniel moved like he'd done this 100 times before. Quick, precise, every shot controlled. He ducked behind a crate, returned fire, then shifted position before the men could pin him down. His voice cut through gunfire. Stay behind me. One of the men crept along the sidewall, his flashlight beam bouncing off the bricks. He was close to spotting the boy. The boy froze, pressing himself against the trash can. His palms were slick with sweat, but he didn't let go of the bag. At the last second, Daniel's gun barked. The flashlight clattered to the ground, rolling across the alley. The man dropped with a groan, clutching his shoulder. The boy flinched, his heart hammering harder. He didn't like the violence, but he knew one thing. Without Daniel, he wouldn't have lasted an hour. The fight pressed on. More shots rang out. More shadows darted across the walls. Daniel's jaw was clenched, his breathing even despite the chaos. He ducked, rolled, and fired again. Another man cried out. Then silence. For a moment, the alley was still, save for the distant hum of the city. Daniel held his stance, gun ready, scanning every shadow. The boy peeked out from behind the trash cans. His voice shook. Did we stop them? Daniel didn't answer immediately. He kept listening. Somewhere deeper in the darkness, he caught the faint scrape of shoes on gravel. He muttered under his breath, not all of them. Suddenly, from the rooftop above, a figure leaned out. A beam of light cut straight toward the boy. Kid, move! Daniel shouted, but it was too late. The man on the roof jumped down, landing hard in front of the boy. He grabbed the backpack with a rough yank. The boy cried out, holding tight with both arms. No, let go! Daniel fired instantly, but the man used the boy as a shield, dragging him backward into the alley. Drop the gun, officer! The man shouted, pressing a knife against the boy's neck. The boy's eyes went wide with terror. Daniel froze, his gun still raised. His voice was steady, but his eyes burned cold. Let him go. The man snarled, pulling the boy tighter. You think you can take all of us? That bag doesn't belong to him. It doesn't belong to you either. Hand it over, and maybe I won't spill the kid's blood right here. The boy's arms trembled, but he didn't release the backpack. It's mine. You can't have it. His voice cracked, but his grip stayed firm. Daniel took one slow step forward. His finger rested on the trigger, but his voice softened. Listen to me, kid. Don't fight his pull. Just hold tight. Trust me. The boy swallowed hard, his body frozen between fear and desperation. The man's knife pressed closer, glinting under the dim light. Last chance, officer. Daniel's eyes narrowed. He shifted slightly, adjusting his aim. You picked the wrong night to play this game. Before the man could react, Daniel fired. The bullet struck the knife, knocking it from the man's hand. Sparks flew as the blade clattered to the ground. In the same motion, Daniel lunged forward, slamming the man against the wall. The boy stumbled free, clutching the backpack. The man roared, throwing punches, but Daniel was faster. He blocked, struck back, and in a flurry of movement, the man dropped to the ground, groaning in pain. Daniel grabbed the boy's arm. We have to move. Now. They sprinted out of the alley, the boy gasping for air, his legs shaking from adrenaline. The streets were quiet, but Daniel knew silence didn't mean safety. More men would come. He had seen their numbers, heard their coordination. Whoever was behind this had resources. The boy tugged on his sleeve as they ran. Why don't we just go to the police station? Show them the papers. The flash drive. If they see it, they'll stop these men, right? Daniel's jaw tightened. He shook his head. Not that simple. If what you're saying is true, if the names in that folder are real, then some of the people chasing you might already be sitting inside the station. You'd be handing them exactly what they want. The boy's stomach dropped. Then where do we go? Daniel's eyes scanned the streets. He thought quickly, weighing options. Somewhere they won't expect. Somewhere safe until I figure out who I can trust. They darted through back streets, sticking to shadows. The boy's legs burned, but he kept up. He didn't complain. After several blocks, Daniel led him into an old, boarded-up warehouse. The inside smelled of dust and rusted metal. Shafts of moonlight spilled through broken windows. Daniel set the boy down on a crate. Catch your breath. The boy hugged the backpack, his face pale but determined. They'll find us. They always find us. Daniel crouched in front of him, his voice steady but intense. Then we'll be ready for them. But I need you strong. I need you focused. Can you do that? The boy nodded, swallowing hard. Yes. Daniel pulled out his phone, scrolling quickly. He hesitated, then dialed a number. His voice dropped to a whisper. It's me. I need a favor. Quiet place, off the radar. Tonight. He hung up, his expression unreadable. The boy leaned closer. Who was that? Daniel looked him in the eye. Someone who owes me, and someone I hope I can still trust. Before the boy could ask more, the distant sound of engines rumbled through the night. The boy's grip on the backpack tightened again. Daniel stood, his eyes sharp. They're not giving up. Get ready. The warehouse filled with silence once more. Both of them knew another fight was coming, and this one would be even harder. The warehouse was dark and heavy with silence. The boy sat on a crate, clutching his backpack like his life depended on it. Daniel stood near a broken window, eyes scanning the shadows outside. The hum of approaching engines grew louder, headlights flashing briefly against the walls. They're here, Daniel muttered. The boy's stomach twisted. He whispered, What do we do? Daniel didn't flinch. He checked his gun, slid another clip into place, and crouched beside the boy. His voice was low but firm. You don't move unless I say. Understand? The boy nodded, his hands trembling against the bag. The roar of engines cut off. Doors slammed shut. Voices carried through the night, muffled but drawing closer. Heavy boots crunched on gravel as the men spread out around the warehouse. Daniel exhaled slowly, whispering to himself, They brought more this time. The boy swallowed. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. Why won't they just stop? Daniel's eyes locked onto the boy. Because what's in that bag is more dangerous than any weapon. It's proof, and proof scares people in power more than bullets. The boy's throat tightened. He hugged the backpack tighter. A loud crash echoed as the warehouse door was kicked open. Flashlights pierced the darkness, sweeping across the dusty floor. The boy ducked down instinctively, pressing against the crate. Spread out, one of the men barked. Find them. The kid doesn't leave this building. Daniel raised his gun and fired. The sharp crack rang through the warehouse, sending the men diving for cover. The fight exploded instantly. Shouts, gunfire, flashes of light. The boy crouched low, shielding himself behind the crate, but he never let go of the bag. Daniel moved fast, rolling behind a steel beam, returning fire with precision. Each shot was controlled, measured. 2 men went down, their flashlights clattering across the floor. But more kept coming. The boy's heart pounded. He wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't obey. He could only watch Daniel fight, a storm of movement and sound. Then a voice boomed across the warehouse, deeper and colder than the rest. Daniel. The firing slowed. Daniel froze at the sound, his jaw tightening. He knew that voice. From the shadows, a tall man stepped forward. He wore a long coat and carried himself with authority. His face was lined with age, but his eyes were sharp. The other men lowered their guns slightly as he approached. The boy whispered, Who is that? Daniel's grip on his gun tightened. His voice was bitter. Captain Harris. The boy's eyes widened. He's a cop. Harris smirked. Not just a cop. Your old boss, Daniel. Surprised. Daniel's body was tense. I should have known. You're always dirty. Harris chuckled, shaking his head. Dirty? No. Practical. This city runs on power, and power belongs to those willing to hold it. You walked away, Daniel. You thought being honest would save you. But honesty doesn't buy silence. It doesn't bury secrets. It doesn't protect you. The boy's stomach sank. He realized now why Daniel hadn't taken him to the police station. If Harris was in charge, then the whole chase made sense. Harris stepped closer, his eyes flicking to the boy. So this is a stray causing all the trouble. The boy glared, his voice shaking. I'm not a stray. Harris smirked. Tough kid, but you're out of your depth. You have something that belongs to me. His hand extended. Give me the bag. The boy shook his head violently. No, it's proof. Everyone needs to see it. Harris's smile dropped. His voice hardened. Kid, no one's going to see it. That's why we're here. That's why men are bleeding on this floor. Daniel stepped forward, gun aimed directly at Harris. You're not touching him. The room tensed. Guns clicked on both sides. The boy's fingers dug into the backpack straps, his body trembling. Harris studied Daniel for a moment, then sighed. You still think you can fight the tide. But here's the truth. You'll both be dead in 5 minutes. Hand me the bag, and maybe the boy gets a quicker death. Daniel's eyes burned. Or maybe you die right here. For a second, no one moved. The air was thick, every man waiting for someone to fire first. Then Daniel whispered sharply, Now! He shoved the boy behind another crate and opened fire. The warehouse erupted again. Harris dove for cover as his men unleashed a storm of bullets. Daniel moved like lightning, taking down 2 men in rapid succession. The boy crawled low, clutching the backpack, his heart hammering. He spotted a side door partially open, a way out. But he couldn't leave Daniel. Not now. Daniel yelled over the gunfire. "Run! Kid! Get out of here!" The boy froze, torn. His eyes darted between the door and Daniel, who was pinned down by Harris's men. "Run!" Daniel shouted again, his voice fierce. The boy made his choice. He sprinted toward the door, clutching the backpack tight. Bullets cracked against the walls, sparks flying near his feet. But he didn't stop. He burst into night air, lungs burning. Behind him, the gunfire raged on. The boy stumbled into the street, gasping for breath. He fumbled with the backpack, pulling out the folder of papers and the small flash drive. His mind raced. He couldn't go to the police. Harris controlled too many of them. But maybe the press, reporters, someone who couldn't be silenced easily. Suddenly, a car screeched to a halt in front of him. The passenger door swung open. A woman leaned out, her face tight with urgency. "Get in." The boy hesitated, clutching the folder. "Who are you?" The woman held up a badge, not police, but press. Chicago Tribune. "Daniel called me. If you want the truth out, this is your chance." The boy's chest heaved. He looked back at the warehouse. The sound of gunfire was still sharp, echoing in the night. His throat tightened. He climbed into the car. The woman floored the gas, tires screeching as they tore away from the scene. The boy held the folder and flash drive to his chest, tears blurring his vision. Behind them, the warehouse rumbled with explosions of sound, shouts, shots, chaos. The boy whispered under his breath, barely audible, "Please make it out, Daniel." The woman glanced at him, her face grim but determined. "If what you have is real, kid, the city's about to burn." The boy tightened his grip on the backpack. He didn't care about the city at that moment. He cared about the man who had believed in him when no one else had. The car sped into the darkness, carrying the proof that powerful men had killed to hide. And somewhere inside that warehouse, Daniel was still fighting, refusing to let corruption win. If you like this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Also, and other to strengthen our community. Let us know in the comments where you are watching from and what time you are currently watching this video.